Alright, so everybody at this point should have heard of Buzzfeed. In case you're not aware, congratulations, you're one of the lucky. But Buzzfeed is a website that just kind of posts clickbaity articles all the time. They're kind of like Gawker, except they're not as vicious towards people. So they're relatively innocuous, but they are equally as annoying. Like they're so sure that they're morally superior to everybody else. And that can be really annoying. Most of their videos are just of drunk girls hugging kittens. This one was the one titled Questions Muslims Have for Non-Muslims. So let's just go through the video real fast. It's a quick one.
What's the deal with Santa? So breaking and entering is okay long as it's a chubby white dude. And he's eating your mama's cookies?
Little comical thing about Santa. Let's move on.
When are you gonna stop asking me if I pray 5 times a day? That's so mean, because I don't. I feel guilty.
That's one of the core tenets of Islam. So if I were to hazard a guess, I'd say that is why they ask you.
Why must you put bacon in everything?
That's because bacon's like the herpes of food cravings. Once you get it, there's just no going back.
Do you really think women wearing a hijab don't have hair underneath? Do you think that when you see someone with a beanie, a hat, a hoodie?
I've literally never met a single person who thought that somebody wearing a hijab had absolutely no hair underneath it. I mean, maybe one might assume that because maybe a girl was caught not wearing one, had acid thrown on her face, and therefore lost all of her hair. But that could not be the reason.
Why do you think all Muslims are Arab?
Now, only about 20% of Muslims live in actual Arab countries. The majority of Muslims actually live in South and Southeast Asia, which is a fact that a lot of people don't actually know about Muslims. Why people think this is most likely, when most people in the United States really started paying attention to the Muslim world was, of course, 9/11. That had to do with Afghanistan and Iraq and that little group of countries there. And all the other dealings most people have had with Muslims have been stuff out of Iran or stuff out of Iraq or stuff out of Libya or Egypt. So a lot of times they associate an Arab-looking person with a Muslim. It's the same reason why people assume that all Mexicans are brown. You've seen thousands of white Mexicans. It's just that you haven't known it. Because when they walk down the street, you're like, hey, it's a white guy.
1 billion people in the Middle East. That's geographically, physically, intellectually impossible.
Once again, most of these I haven't heard people actually ever say. So I don't know where all these misconceptions supposedly are coming from. I feel like they're trying to kind of like dumb it down because I have heard some other assumptions, but they're typically a lot worse than these. Anyways, so he's correct that 1 billion people do not live in the Middle East. This is probably just kind of a conflated point from the fact that there's 1 billion Muslims, and a lot of people assume that Muslims are predominantly in the Middle East instead of South and Southeast Asia. So I actually will give BuzzFeed that one. But now this part about it being like geographically incorrect, if you add up the area of just like about the 12 countries that everybody agrees with is considered the Middle East, you get a geographical area of about 5.5 million square kilometers. If you take India is only 3.3 million square kilometers, and there are over 1 billion people in India. So when you say that's geographically impossible, no, it's very much not geographically impossible.
Why are only Muslims mentioned in talks about religious extremism? Did y'all forget about the KKK? Westboro Baptist Church, Crusades? We all have the bad seeds in the family.
So this particular point is actually the entire reason why I wanted to make this video. Because it gets brought up time and time again. Anytime an extremist Islamic attack happens, they just bring up, oh, Crusades, KKK, can't say anything. White people have done bad stuff too. Besides from the fallacy of trying to say, oh, your arguments are invalid because people from your line have done bad stuff in the past. Let's just break down the 3 groups she brought up: the KKK, the Westboro Baptists, and the Crusades. Let's start off with the Westboro Baptists. The Westboro Baptists, who are a group of assholes who go out protesting soldiers' funerals, they have killed in the entire time they've been around. Let me check the paperwork real fast. Oh God, I need a pencil. Let me do some calculations. Shit, he had to carry the 2. 0. They've killed 0 people. Nobody has ever been killed by Westboro Baptists. They're just annoying assholes. We got the KKK, who in 90 years of their existence have killed 3,500 people. Now, back in the 1920s, the KKK had approximately 6 million followers, 6 million members. By the 1930s, they had 30,000. And in less than 10 years, the KKK, not even a fraction of their size, because even back then, even back in an era where people will routinely say, like, oh, it was so racist back then, people realized, no, that's nonsense. We can't have that. We don't want that in America. And they stamped them out. And nowadays, it's about 5,000 followers, everyone of which is made a joke of. No one takes them seriously. And then you have the Crusades, which happened over 500 years ago. Over 500 years ago. I'll be talking about reaching deep. Crusades don't even deserve to be talked about. And then let's bring up a modern day example of Islamic extremist. ISIS. The CIA estimates that ISIS has about 20 to 30,000 followers. And in 2 years, ISIS has killed about 20,000 people. In 2016 alone, we've had the attack in Brussels, which killed 21, injured a couple hundred. We've had what happened in Tripoli, where about 300 people were executed. We've had another attack in Paris, I think a coffee shop, and countless attacks in the Middle Eastern countries from suicide bombers and from people who wanted nothing but to kill for their religion. So when you want to know how come we only ever talk about Islamic extremists by a large margin are the biggest problem when it comes to extremists, not Buddhists, not Christian extremists, not Hindu extremists, Islamic extremists. And also, the figure I brought up a second ago about the KKK going from 6 million to 30,000 in 10 years in the United States. There is a tacit acceptance of what ISIS does by moderate, so-called moderate Islamic members, where every time someone says something about ISIS, oh, yes, what they've done is terrible. Yes, it's horrible. I don't represent it. But you have to understand, they're mad about blah, blah, blah. But you have to understand, can you imagine for a second, take Donald Trump. If Donald Trump, or any person for that matter, can you imagine for a second that if somebody said, yes, what the KKK did was terrible, but you have to understand, no, we wouldn't take them seriously for a second. They'd be laughed out, they'd be mocked, they wouldn't be allowed back onto whatever avenue they were speaking on. It's only Islamic extremists that we give the whole butt thing to. Yes, we know that there are murderous people who kill every day, but we've upset them by going onto the land, so we have to tacitly accept the fact that millions are going to be murdered. There's no comparison.
Why do you expect every Muslim woman to wear a headscarf? Does every Catholic woman dress like a nun? Does every Jewish man wear a yarmulke? Does every Shrek wear a tunic?
The whole head covering thing, I do think for the most part, some people do blow that out of proportion, because I don't think it's absolutely required. But that's a technicality, because we've seen what happened in the Middle East, at least, whenever women do not follow that rule, and it's not pretty.
Are you really scared that we're going to take over America with Sharia law? I can barely wake up for Fajr, let alone wage a holy war.
No, most people in the United States aren't worried about you taking over the United States with Sharia law, because honestly, I don't think that could ever happen. But different countries, because about 1.1 billion Muslims worldwide support Sharia law. I know for the most part that they were just joking around with that video, but some of the points do get brought up a lot, and some of them are quite vexing. So I'm not quite sure what they believe. I'm pretty sure it's probably based pretty accurately on what they said in the video. But especially the points about, comparing the KKK, Westboro Baptist, to modern-day Islamic extremists, that's ridiculous. All right, so, thank you guys for listening. See you next time.